Right. So I'd like to say good morning and thank you so much for joining us for our third day of our University of Maryland St. Joseph Medical Center Cancer Institute Cancer Survivorship Week 2021. National Cancer Survivors Day was Sunday and is an annual celebration on the first Sunday of June. We're excited that we are extending it to a week of virtual events. As with National Cancer Survivors Day, we are going to support the many challenges that come with a cancer diagnosis, cancer treatment, and life after a cancer diagnosis and treatment. We know that with over 16.9 million cancer patients in the US, it is incredibly important to support the ongoing challenges of cancer survivorship and to promote more resources, research, and survivor friendly legislation that can improve cancer survivors' quality of life. We've put together an exciting week of virtual events that we know will interest, support, and serve you and your family wherever you are on your cancer journey. Our dedicated and talented staff at the Barbara L. Posner Wellness and Support Center and throughout the entire Cancer Institute are part of your events, and you will not want to miss this. Please share this week of events with your friends and family. All are welcome. And check out our website, umstjoseph.org/superhero for a complete list of events and links to each virtual event. Let us know of any questions you might have at cancerwellnesssupport@umm.edu, or you can always call me, Lindsay, at the administrative coordinator at 410-427-2598. And now we're going to welcome back Lauren Moller-Seat, our resident dietitian. Lauren has extensive experience in long-term care, and she's been a dietitian for 2 years and recently joined our team in March. So she is going to tell us about some of the myths and bust some myths regarding soy and cancer treatment. So without further ado, Lauren, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lindsay. Let me just share my presentation with you all. All right. So this morning we're going to be diving into some nutrition myth busting and breaking down some common nutrition misconceptions. So just a disclaimer, as usual, this presentation is for informational purposes only. Everyone's individual needs do vary. So if you would like to come in and speak about your specific needs, please call Lindsay at the Wellness and Support Center to schedule an appointment with me. All right, first up, we have the misconception that I hear almost on a daily basis: sugar feeds cancer. Now, this is a little bit complicated than just a straight yes or no. The main thing is that all cells need sugar. Sugar includes granulated white sugar that we might think about, brown, agave, honey, carbohydrates from crackers, bread, fruits and vegetables, dairy, all of those things. Almost everything that's a carbohydrate gets turned into glucose in the body. So when we talk about sugar, it's nutritionally, as our bodies use it, it's very complicated. So it's not just about those white added sugars that you might be referring to when people are thinking about sugar feeds cancer, but really the body doesn't know the difference. And glucose, that type of sugar, is the brain's and most cells' preferred fuel source. So it's incredibly important to get it. And not eating carbohydrates or not eating sugar means that your body has to convert protein or fat into glucose, which is a very inefficient process. And our body doesn't like to do all of that extra work just to get those glucose molecules. So the main thing that to think about is not to stress around food. All foods can fit. If this is a good time in your life to prioritize a healthy diet, you may want to think about reducing added sugars. So those are the things that would come in our more processed foods, thinking about cutting down on sugar sweetened beverages and things like that. Again, that might not be your focus right now, and that's okay. But we don't need to demonize sugar because, again, it's feeding all of our cells. And then also just want to emphasize that being curious about the desire to control food or your body. It's very common for people to feel like they need to control something, especially when the rest of their lives are feeling out of control or they're feeling especially stressed. People often turn to trying to control their bodies to give them that semblance of control. But that might not be very beneficial for you. So it might be better to consider other resources for how to manage stress. So thinking about things like therapy, coming into the Wellness and Support Center for some healing touch therapy, going for a walk, talking with a friend, doing some journaling. Those are all ways that can really have been studied and shown to really help manage stress. So those might be more beneficial to you than trying to really have a firm control of your body and what your diet is right now. All right, our second misconception is that soy isn't safe. We talked about this a little bit yesterday in the plant-based diets presentation, but the main thing is that soy foods are safe and beneficial. The sort of fear around it started with the phytoestrogen in soy, which is a type of isoflavone, and they are not the same as estrogen in the body, and they cannot bind with estrogen receptors. So just because they have a similar structure doesn't mean that they respond in the body the same way as estrogen does. In 2019, a study of over 330,000 participants found that soy protein intake was associated with a decreased risk and mortality of breast cancer. Studies in the US and China shows that soy intake reduces recurrence and improves survival in breast cancer patients. Studies also show that soy does not increase risk of other hormone-related cancers. And soy foods have been the focus of research, but the isolated soy protein or isoflavone-enriched powders are not as extensively studied. So those are the ones to watch out for, just because we don't have as much research on them. And then another study, this is from the American Institute of Cancer Research, showed that among postmenopausal Asian women, those who ate the most soy foods, about 2 or 3 servings a day, had the lowest risk of recurrence or death compared to women who ate the least, less than a few servings a week. These findings were also seen among predominantly Caucasian women who consumed soy levels at comparable levels. Overall, population studies do not show any harmful interactions between soy foods and anti-estrogen medications, and a small number of studies even suggest that soy foods might be most protective for women who take tamoxifen or an aromatase inhibitor. So they're still doing research on that, but all signs point to soy foods being safe and beneficial. So the main takeaway is if you enjoy soy foods, you can feel free to consume them safely and confidently, even a couple of times per day. A moderate consumption is about one-third cup of tofu, about 3 ounces, a cup of soy milk, half a cup of edamame or soybeans, and a quarter cup of soy nuts. If using a protein powder, you might choose a different option than something that contains isolated soy protein, or better yet, focusing on getting your nutrition from whole foods instead of supplements. So again, if you didn't catch the plant-based presentation yesterday, that will be online in a few days. So check that out for more ideas on how to get protein from real food sources. All right, number 3, organic is better. This is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, just because the fear around produce and organic makes you think that if you're not eating organic, you shouldn't be eating produce. And that's not true. All produce is good. So whether it's fresh, frozen, canned, conventional, organic, more is better. So the benefits of fruits and vegetables outweigh any minimal effects from any potential residual pesticides. The main thing is to make sure that you're washing your produce, whether it's conventional or organic. Always rinse it under cold water. No need to use any soaps or cleansers. Just cold water is enough. And then as you can see in this image, it's from the Safe Fruits and Vegetables website. They have a fun little calculator where you can enter in, just for adults or children, and it will calculate the amount that you can consume before you would have any effect from the highest level of pesticides in that type of produce. So as you can see, a child could consume 181 servings, so that would be at least a half cup servings of strawberries in one day, without any effect if the strawberries had the highest pesticide residue recorded for strawberries by the USDA. And just a note on that, even the residuals that have been noticed, they're been found in food, they're always very far under the limit that's set by the Environmental Protection Agency. They leave a big leeway between what's detected and what's actually considered to have any hazard, so that there's no risk there. And also, just so you know, a 2012 Stanford meta-analysis of 230 studies found little difference between conventional and organic produce. Organic produce was only slightly higher in one vitamin, which was phosphorus, which most people have adequate amounts in their diet, is not something that we usually are deficient in or have to worry about. And then a few studies showed that organic milk had slightly higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids. So there may be some slight benefit to organic milk in terms of omega-3s, but otherwise nutritionally, they're the same. So diving a little bit deeper into what it means to be organic versus conventional. One of the big misconceptions is that organic produce doesn't use any pesticides or insecticides or anything like that. And they are allowed to use approved insecticides that are naturally derived. And they can use a few approved synthetic pesticides. So that's if other methods for pest control don't work, then they may be able to use some approved synthetic pesticides. So organic really is more about farming practices, about soil fertility and crop rotation. Again, because they're not able to use pesticides as much, then they have to resort to things like tilling the soil to prevent weeds and pests. And so that can also have an environmental impact. So especially around here in the Maryland area with the bay, doing more of the tilling can actually be hazardous because it has higher risk of erosion and filling our bay water with soil. So there's definitely pros and cons, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always the best practice for the location. It's just a general standard. And then in terms of buying products, there is, if you have that USDA organic label on it, it means that at least 95% of the ingredients are organic. It's not 100%. And in dairy or meat farming, there's no antibiotics or added growth hormones. On the other hand, in conventional, they're allowed to use synthetic or natural pesticides. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, evaluates and sets safety limits on pesticide use with a large margin of safety. And the FDA ensures that produce sold in the US meets those safety standards. And so anything that's being sold here has gone through those same safety standards. And then in terms of hormones, there's no added hormones in poultry or pork. Oh, I want to go back real quick. So again, part of the reason why this comes up so often is because of the environmental working groups list, the Dirty Dozen, which you may have heard about. And one of the main issues with that list is that it adds fear around eating produce. And as I mentioned, all produce is good produce. We're not eating enough of it. And that should be the main focus. So having that fear around whether it's safe to eat or not is really damaging it. There's been a lot of research showing that that fear creates lower intakes of produce consumption. The other problem is that they're only looking at conventional produce, but as I mentioned, organic produce uses various insecticides and pesticides too. So there's not really a very good comparison between organic and conventional. And in their list, they're not evaluating any potential residuals with any reference to the safety limits. So just because those 12 fruits and vegetables that they're listing on their Dirty Dozen list have high levels, that doesn't mean that those levels are actually to an unsafe level, because they're not. Right now, we're able to measure the residuals to parts per million or parts per billion. So we can measure really, really, really small amounts. And if you're not referencing what the safety limit is or anything about what the comparison is between a high level versus a low level, then it's not very helpful information. So just something to keep in mind. Again, going back to the meat industry, there has been some concern about the BST, bovine somatotropin, a hormone that's used to increase milk or meat production in cattle. Now, something that has been banned in the UK and Europe, but is still licensed in the US. It was banned because of welfare concerns. So again, more about the care of the animals than any concerns on human health, but also just check out whichever milk products you're buying, because I noticed that most of the conventionally grown milk, they are still putting on their labels that they are not using any of those hormones. So just because they're not organic doesn't necessarily mean that they are using those hormones. So just something to keep in mind. The main takeaway for this is that all produce is good produce and we should be eating more of it. If sustainability and farming practices are important to you and you can afford organic produce, by all means, buy what you prefer. Some other options, if you're worried about environmental impact, is to support buying local or even buying imperfect foods. So these are a couple of images of some of the popular options now. I personally use Hungry Harvest, and they do have an organic option as well. Basically, these organizations are taking food that doesn't meet the perfection standards or has been overproduced, or for whatever reason, the grocery stores are rejecting these foods. These companies come in, box it up, and create like a CSA box so that you can experience those. Some of them can get mailed right to your house. Another option is doing that community-supported agriculture and having the produce where you can go pick it up from a local farm. So that's another option for if you want to really support your local farm industry and learn about the farmers and get to know them and what their practices are. All right. Another misconception that I hear is that cow's milk is bad, or more commonly, oh, I'm using almond milk, or oh, I'm using this other milk, even though I don't have a lactose intolerance or any concerns around tolerating milk. So the main question is, why dairy? Why are we doing cow's milk? Why is that such a big thing? And one of the main things is that it's very cost effective. It provides protein, calcium, vitamin D, and other essential nutrients. So that's why it's commonly referred to. The main consideration is that dairy alternatives may not be nutritionally equivalent. So that's something to be checking on and checking those nutrition facts to make sure that whatever you're using, you know what's in it and you know whether it's a helpful choice for you. So here is a list of some of the most common supplement options or dairy alternatives. So on this list, I used 1% cow's milk just to have some comparison among the total fat. If you used a fat-free option, obviously there would be no fat in it. The calories would be about 90 calories per cup. As compared to these other options. Again, the main thing that I want you to be focusing on is typically we're looking for protein in our milk. So cow's milk has 8 grams of protein. Silk soy milk has 7 grams. Almond milk only has 1 gram. Coconut milk has 0. And coconut milk is notably very high in saturated fat. Again, saturated fat is the type of fat that we're trying to reduce because it can cause heart issues, clogging our arteries. So that's one that we want to be reducing. So 20% is rather high. And then the last one is oat milk, which only has 3 grams of protein. Other considerations are calcium and vitamin D. So those are seen at the bottom. Again, this is going to be mostly fortified in any of the non-dairy alternatives, and even the vitamin D in cow's milk is usually fortified. But again, we're looking for cow's milk sets the standard at about 25% of calcium. Soy milk is at 20%, although technically the milligrams are the same. Almond milk is a little bit better fortification. Again, that's just added in. 35% calcium in coconut milk, 10%, and oat milk is 25%. Vitamin D, we're looking at 10% in cow's milk, 15% in soy, 25% in almond, 10% in coconut, and 20% in oat milk. So again, just something to keep in mind. Again, all of these non-dairy alternatives are in the unsweetened or original state. So if you chose a flavored non-dairy milk, that's also going to increase the amount of sugar and increase the calories. So again, just to point out, the sugar in cow's milk is all naturally occurring from the lactose in it, but the other sugars will be added for other flavors. Again, it looks like oat milk is, again, having just some of the sugars from naturally that occur in the carbohydrates of oats. So the main consideration here is that soy milk is the most similar nutritionally to cow's milk. But you also, I mean, whichever milk you choose, whichever you like the taste of and can financially afford, those are all good options. But you want to make sure that you know what you're getting. If you're expecting to have protein from your milk and you're choosing a non-dairy option, then you probably are not getting as much as you think unless you're choosing soy milk. So just make sure that you're checking those nutrition facts. And that also applies to yogurts. I've seen quite a couple of patients who have been switching to those coconut non-dairy yogurts. And again, if it's a coconut milk, then there's typically no protein in it. So check those nutrition facts to make sure that you know what you're getting and that it's as nutritionally dense as you want it to be. All right. Next one is that natural supplements are safe. So the main thing is that natural doesn't necessarily mean it's safe. There's sort of this false dichotomy that we've set up between natural versus synthetic, with the assumption that natural things are safe and synthetic things aren't. But often in the history of our medicine, natural remedies were the basis for how we created medicine. Synthetic versions were created so that we could control it better, so that we could have more sustainability and regulate the production of it so that there's just that more regimented routine use of it. Including many cancer drugs have been based off of some of these more natural remedies that we've used in the past. But just because something is natural doesn't mean that it's inherently safer. So I like to use the example of grapefruit. Super natural, very innocuous, but it still can have an interaction with medications. So just because something is natural, if you're taking it as a supplement, again, we don't really know what might be in the supplement. If it's naturally made, that doesn't mean that it's safe. It especially doesn't mean that it's safe with the medications that you might be taking. So that's just something to always keep in mind and check with your pharmacist, or make sure that there's no interactions with your medications that you're taking. And then also just a side note that artificial doesn't mean that it's unsafe either. The American Institute of Cancer Research has shown that there's no evidence that artificial sweeteners are linked to cancer, and that those earlier concerns about it have been discredited. So that's just something else to keep in mind if you are the type that is trying to watch your added sugar intake and you want to use one of those artificial sweeteners, they are considered safe. So again, main takeaway, just thinking critically about marketing terms. Natural tends to be used just for marketing. It doesn't have any defined meaning. Checking with your pharmacist for any potential food interactions with your medications or any interactions with supplements for a new drug that you might be taking. If you do have questions about what supplements you're taking and whether they're safe, if you're interested in starting a new supplement, make sure that you're talking with your medical team, or you can always schedule an appointment here at the Wellness and Support Center, either with Ginny, the nurse practitioner, or with me, and we can discuss your specific needs and what your options are in terms of supplements that you might be interested in. All right, next up is a big one. BMI, the body mass index, is a measure of health. So first of all, the BMI, a little bit of history on that. This was a tool measuring height and weight that was created over 200 years ago, and was used to define the ideal man, notably excluding anyone that wasn't a healthy white European male, so not super helpful. And it was never intended to be used to measure individual health. It was looking at populations. It regained popularity in the early 20th century when the US life insurance companies started using it to determine who was going to get, who was the potential policyholders and who was going to get covered by their insurance companies. And then a statistician determined that the BMI was as good as any other measure, other potentials being using the calipers to measure fat and things like that. And then in 1985, the National Institute of Health decided to use the BMI in their definition of obesity. And then in 1998, they lowered the threshold for what the definition of overweight and obese were. So overnight, many people suddenly became switched into these overweight and obese categories. So that's where it comes from. And I know that you're thinking that the research says that a high BMI is linked to a variety of health conditions, but it's important to keep in mind that the BMI is just a measure of height and weight. It doesn't take into account sex or race or activity level, health status, frame, age, muscle, any of that is not included in it. So it's hard to determine whether the BMI is actually what's related to these health conditions, or is it a history of weight cycling, or more commonly referred to as the yo-yo dieting, where you sort of lose a bunch of weight really fast, then you can't sustain the diet, so then your weight goes all the way back up, and you might even get a little bit more weight until you find your next diet, drop it fast, and the cycle repeats, right? We've all heard about that yo-yo back and forth effect. So that might be a confounding factor in the research, because that's back and forth is really hard on our bodies. Or weight stigma may also be a confounding factor, where we haven't been able to sort of suss out whether it's that people in larger bodies are not giving care as well as they deserve. If they're going into the doctor for anything, they're being told to lose weight as opposed to addressing what their real concerns are, and things like that. That can also be part of the issue in the research. And it's important to recognize that weight is an outcome, and it's not something that we can always control, especially with medications and things like that. There's a lot of things that influence our weight. So that's also hard to manage. And that there isn't convincing research for how to obtain sustainable weight loss. If there was one way to do it, then people would do it and it wouldn't be a problem. But it might just be that we have body diversity and we are normally going to be different sizes. So one of video that I like is the problem with poodle science on YouTube. If you have a few minutes today, I recommend that you look that up and watch it. It goes into a little bit of the challenges with our research and why size diversity is probably just a thing that exists and is as normal as having feet that are different sizes. So the main takeaway is that we can't know the health of someone just by looking at them, and that health promoting behaviors will always be health promoting. So it's important to focus on the things that we can control, like balanced diet, movement, getting enough rest, reducing our stress, routine doctor's appointments, flossing, going to the dentist, and taking medications as prescribed are all things that help our health, that may or may not have any effect on the size of our bodies. And those are still going to be beneficial for us regardless of what our weight does. All right. Eating after 7 p.m. is bad, or after 8 or 9 or any randomly attributed time. The main thing is that food is fuel, and eating adequately throughout the day is important to fuel your body and brain, stabilizing your blood sugars, stabilizing your mood so that you're not getting that hangry feeling, prevent cravings, and giving you enough opportunities for nutrition. When you eat is really going to be dependent on when you're awake. If you stay up really late and get up late in the morning, then you're going to be wanting to shift your eating schedule. Just like if you worked night shifts, you're going to have to shift your eating schedule to accommodate when you're awake. And then considering what food choices you are making. Oftentimes it's about the foods that are eaten late at night that people really are having a problem with, whether it's the chips or the cookies, the ice cream, alcohol, things like that. While those foods are all delicious and can be part of a balanced diet, they're not as nutritious as they could be, and that might be more of the thing to focus on, is the nutrition quality of the food. So often people are having cravings because they ate too little during the day, and then their brain needs more energy. So you get all of these cravings late at night so that your body is actually fueling yourself and fueling your brain. That's often where those cravings can come from. So if you eat more consistently throughout the day, thinking about eating every 3 to 4 hours when you're awake, again, if you're doing night shifts or something like that, you might be eating all at night. So really thinking about when you're awake and making sure that you're fueling yourself consistently throughout the day. And you may just need to plan for a more purposeful snack in the evening. If that's your routine, if you notice that you're always hungry in the evenings, planning for it and really focusing on those healthy food choices can help make sure that you're getting, again, that nutrition in that you really need throughout the day. And combining a protein or a fat with a carbohydrate really makes you more satisfied, gives you more of that nutrition that you need. So there are some ideas: peanut butter with a fruit, hummus and crackers, or carrots, or celery, or anything like that, cheese and grapes, eggs and a vegetable, or toast, yogurt and fruit. Those are just some of the ideas to make sure that you're getting a snack that's actually feeling satisfying. And again, some of those favorite foods, chips, cookies, ice cream, those can also be part of it. But again, plan for it so that it's more intentional and you don't think, oh, well, I guess I'm not eating well anyway, so I might as well eat the whole carton or eat as much as I want, and then I'll just feel bad about it later anyway. So don't want you to feel that way. And if this is something that you continually have a problem with, again, it's something that we can always talk about. So feel free to schedule an appointment and come in and talk to me about it so that we can figure out what really works best for you. And that's it. Are there any questions, any concerns about the things that I presented, or other things that you've heard about?
Yes, so a question came in earlier in the presentation, but you were on a roll and I didn't want to stop you. In regard
Yeah.
to whole soy or soy protein isolate, it was
Okay.
in reference to your soy slide.
Yeah. We can go back to that. All right. Probably this one.
I believe so.
Um, all right. So mostly again, the research is really focusing on food. So specifically soy foods would include tofu, soybeans, soy nuts, edamame, things like that, where we are looking at the whole serving of food. It's much harder in nutrition research to be looking at things with a soy protein powder, or something that has been extracted from a soy food, just because that's not as commonly done, and the research is just harder to perform that way, especially over a long period of time. So again, focusing on those soy foods to make sure that you're just not getting these extreme quantities. It's much easier to have too much of a powder, right? If you were having that 8 times a day, then that's much easier to overdo than having actual food where you're getting all of the other nutrition benefits from that food source, and it fills you up, and you can't overdo it as much as you might be able to with a powder. Did that
That's right.
clarify?
I think so. But if anyone wants to say otherwise, please let me know. But thank you so much for that update. That's really interesting. And yes, that person said yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Lauren. This is Ginny, and hi, everyone. That's incredible. You've blown my mind with so many myth busters and things that I personally thought, were important to follow. And the biggest message that I got today was how I can, get all the things I need through a balanced diet, and then ways that I don't have to over control all of that, because maybe that does feel good when things aren't feeling good, and that I can do some other self-care type things as well as eating this balanced diet. And the information out there is so complicated about what is the exact right thing to eat so that you never get sick, or so that you can be as healthy as possible. And really, your information and just being able to listen to our body and what does it actually need? Does it need, water? Does it need rest? Does it need a good snack? Does it need, some exercise? So thank you very much. And I love the Hungry Harvest, because, I do want to do things that are socially responsible. And it felt like maybe that was, doing some of the local sustainable foods, but I never knew about, imperfect foods. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's a similar organization to Hungry Harvest, where they're collecting foods that have been rejected from grocery stores. Again, there can be for a variety of reasons. And then they box it up and send it straight to your house so that you don't even have to go to the store or go pick it up from somewhere like you typically do with a CSA. And so while it might be slightly scarred on the outside or be a funny shape, too small, too big, things like that, it's still perfectly delicious food that just didn't meet the standards that we have for our grocery stores. So it's a great way of reducing food waste because otherwise these foods get thrown away.
And you've used them? Have you had any problems using it before?
I do. I use Hungry Harvest. I haven't tried the other ones, but and some of them are in different regions of the country. Although I'm pretty sure all of them do uh, send to Maryland. Hungry Harvest is actually a locally developed one. The starter of it started at University of Maryland.
Oh.
And so then he really developed it and he donates a portion of his profits and donates food to various organizations that are in need. And so I've always loved the produce that I've gotten from there. It's always been, perfectly delicious. Again, slightly funny looking sometimes. And now they even have more options where you can select different things for when you schedule the box. So I get mine every 2 weeks, but you can get it every week. You can have different sizes. They're very cool organizations. So definitely check those out if you're looking for a way to increase your produce without having to go to the grocery store more often because they've got lots of options.
And then I can never remember the acronym of CSA, but Community
Yes,
Supported
CSA,
Agriculture.
community
Okay.
supported agriculture is again where you're buying into a portion of a farm and then they send you or you go pick up part of their um, the
Yield or
products that their yield, thank you, that
okay.
they have for the season. And usually that's runs just mostly through the summer months, probably a little bit into the fall. And then again, you're supporting that farmer. So it's really whatever they were able to produce, then that's the portion that you're going to get some of that. So it really puts you in tune with what farmers have to deal with. Again, with that cold spell that we had a few weeks ago and this really hot spell, you just are a lot more in tune to how the weather and everything else really affects the work that our farmers do.
Thank you. And again, there's so many things that I learned from you with the plant-based diet lecture and then with the Mythbuster and I've heard you say many times, and I really support that everybody try to do this, set up an appointment to meet with Lauren to go over some of these things and to reinforce them because it's been a lot of great information and some mind-altering information. So it'll be good to kind of go through it one-on-one with her. Here, good. We have another question.
Yeah, it's what kinds of natural products have been used to develop cancer treating drugs?
That is a great question. I got most of my information on that from another dietitian who has a website called survivorstable.com, Survivors Table. And she goes into more of the specific herbs that have been used in the research for cancer drugs. And so it's very interesting. Her husband is also in uh, drug research, so she has a very in-depth look at all of that. So I definitely recommend looking that up, and we'll have the links available from this presentation in posted when we put up the recording for this as well.
And Lauren, just like some of the, digoxin, that's an actual plant that became a drug. There are 2 or 3 chemotherapies, and I can't think of what they are right now. I don't know if it was tamoxifen or Taxol. One of those are actually, and that might be some of what that question was as well. Um, do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I believe it was Taxol is one of them. There are other ones, but they're always a mouthful, and so I can't fluidly
Right.
say them off the tip of my tongue as
Right.
they're
So it's fascinating. And for who wrote that question in, yeah, there are actual chemotherapies that are being used right now that come from a plant source and then have been not altered, but just been able to be manufactured, I guess, so that they're in this chemical, way to be given as a chemotherapy. Um, so it's fascinating that there's a lot of drugs that come again from natural herbs and plants and things.
Yeah. I saw that question pop up. Mistletoe would be something similar. Again, it's mistletoe is still being fully researched, so it's not quite as common as some of the other ones. But yeah, that's sort of how they are moving towards that, right? Where you have the natural plant product mistletoe, and then they're synthesizing it to give it into a form that can be used in the human body. And so again, with other plants, it's been sort of that research is done with, oh, this seems to have an effect. How can we synthesize it? How can we make it ourselves in a lab so that it's more controlled? We're not using up natural resources to produce it, and we can really regulate it, and then giving that as the final product.
Hi, Lauren. This is Krista Griggs on behalf of Diane Griggs, who couldn't be here this morning. I'm actually in an integrative medicine and nutrition program, and I just want to laud you so much for your presentation today because it is so holistic, so balanced, and very inclusive. And I have to admit that in prior classes, it hasn't always been that way. It's sort of slightly the way you use the word dichotomy really encapsulates what I've been experiencing. So thank you so much for all of the really important messages about how all produce is good for us and the differentiation between organic and conventional and natural and synthetic. What really also resonated with me was about BMI because of all the different people and their individual journeys and how body weight can change. And I'm personally wondering, when we talk about listening to our bodies and understanding the ways that we have these sort of natural cravings or sort of maybe cravings in a way that we're trying to listen to our bodies to determine, are we feeding ourselves out of just because we need something out of necessity? Maybe we have a craving for food because we need something in it, or maybe we're craving something because we just need some comfort. And I would just love to ask you in terms of how do we better discern, what our body is saying to us and how to really discern also from a behavioral aspect, what should we be following to help support our health journey in whatever way that is?
That is a great question, and thank you so much for your kind words. I'm glad that this has felt helpful and balanced. That's always my goal. I love your question because it can be really challenging to sort of understand what listening to our bodies means, and especially people are starting from all different places at that, right? Some people are very out of tune with what their bodies needs, and some people have sort of developed more of an understanding of what their body is asking for. And I think it's so individualized that it's really something that we have to sort of dive deeper into. Again, I always start with making sure that somebody is being adequately nourished throughout the day, because I think that is just such a huge component of making sure that we are getting balanced diet. When we're skipping meals and not prioritizing our nutrition, then we're often going to be lacking in important nutrients that our body is then going to be asking for in different ways. So I think that in general, that's the easiest place to start is, first of all, make sure that you are fueling yourself throughout the day. That's number one. And then getting more curious about, okay, so I'm always having a chocolate craving. Is that a sign that I'm needing something either emotionally, that I need some more care, that I need some comfort? Is it triggered by your emotional state, or is it just a routine thing that you always are craving it? Could be related to the nutrients that we get in our chocolate, right? So magnesium can be in there, antioxidants could be in there. So it could be a craving for an actual nutrient that we might be needing, or it could be a sign that we need more comfort or we need some more support or things like that too. I do like to talk about that food is designed to be comforting, right? I mean, from the moment that we are born, that comfort comes from being fed. So I think it is normal to have an emotional component to our food. We use it in celebrations, we use it in mourning. We always have this tie to food because it is so life-giving. So I think that is part of our tools in our toolbox of self-care is food. And then just making sure that it's used in a healthy way, right? If we're always turning for food to comfort or food for comfort, then that's not healthy, right? Then that can be maladaptive, just like Over exercising can be maladaptive, right? Exercise to some extent is great for us, really important, really helpful, really healthy. But if it becomes too much or becomes too obsessive, then it becomes not helpful for us anymore. And so again, it's finding that balance and recognizing that there are other tools available to us to use for comfort and to use for making sure that our emotional needs are met. So did that help answer your question?
Absolutely. The three major takeaways I got was just really that foundational, making sure that your nutritional needs and fuels are met, and then really kind of trying to be mindful of the way that we're eating, once we have that space to do so or desire to do so. And then also just, I love the point that you made about that food is life-giving and celebratory and something to be experience pleasure and joy from. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, no problem. Thank you for your great question.
Thank you.
Lauren,
You
it's
have
great. Thank you. You say that also very, very well. I just felt a responsibility knowing how you work so thoroughly and research things to make sure that our messages are clear. And it's coming back to me that the question about the mistletoe and about other drugs to treat cancer. So I just want to be clear that for mistletoe, for treating cancer, so mistletoe hasn't been fully researched and validated as something that can treat cancer. They can use it they've seen improvement in overall quality of life with symptoms and side effects from cancer, but it hasn't gone through all its clinical trials to be FDA approved. And what I think I wanted to answer, and maybe Lauren was as well with Taxol, is that's a drug that's gone fully through FDA testing and can treat cancer. So we need to be clear on what we're saying about, again, treating cancer. So mistletoe has definitely shown some good results, but it's not fully FDA approved at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for
That's,
clarifying that, Jenny.
of course, of course. But I really want to go back to how you just summarized the overall idea of, a healthy, balanced eating and meeting, your own individual needs in what you eat and how you notice how your body's doing and what your body truly needs and not overdoing it one way or the other. So you speak so well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other last questions or concerns that anybody has?
If anyone, signs off and says, man, I wish I had asked that, please feel free to reach out to us. I'm happy to take down those questions and get back to you as soon as I have an answer.
And I just put up again, that number again is to Lindsay, our administrative coordinator. So if you want to schedule an appointment, or if you had another question that you didn't have a chance to ask, feel free to call and Lindsay can get that to me as well. Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It was nice talking with you all.
Thank you.